Hello, and thanks for tuning into the New School of Super, Sunsuper's webinar and podcast series covering investment markets, money matters, superannuation, and most importantly, making sure you achieve your retirement dreams. My name's Anne Fuchs, and I head up advice and retirement at Sunsuper, and the team and I work really hard to make sure as many members as possible get great quality financial advice so that they can live their best possible retirement. And part of the best possible financial advice involves education, which is why my main man is here today, Joshua Van Gestel, our National Education Manager here at Sunsuper. Hello, Josh.
Good morning, Anne. I love the ego boost. Your introduction's always
wonderful
to see you.
The members love seeing you when you're out in the regions, but what's wonderful about this medium is that no matter where our members are, they can watch this webinar and watch you. So we're going to be doing a bit of sort of reminiscing, soul-searching, thinking deeply about the good decisions and maybe not good decisions we've made with money. Bit of an Oprah-style session, maybe. I don't know. We'll see where we go. Before we do that, Josh, are you going to take the compliance general advice warning?
I certainly am. Thank you, Anne. So just a reminder that everything that Anne and I are discussing today is of a general advice nature only. And we really encourage you to explore how these circumstances and situations may apply to you. And so to help you in that, please do reach out to us either on 13 11 84 or by visiting our website at sunsuper.com.au, seek out some further information or talk to one of our wonderful team.
That's beautiful. Look, I said this in a previous episode with Brian about how financial literacy is sort of the foundation of members engaging with their money, their superannuation. It is their money, and it's going to be really important at the end of their working life. And understanding, principles about risk and asset allocation and compounding interest. And I think education starts at home. And I'm married to a German. You've got a Dutch name. I'm married to a German fellow who grew up in Düsseldorf. And Germans love talking about money. And I come from an Irish sort of family that don't like talking about money. And so I think about the different decisions in my family over the years. And a lot of it stems from his comfort talking about money in detail and my discomfort and the decisions that we've made ever since. What about you? What are your initial reflections around your family?
Dare I say that the Dutch just like hoarding money, Anne. I actually don't think the Dutch like talking about money too much. And like yourself, I'm actually half Irish as well. So money is certainly something that was very important in our household, but not something that was something we discussed on a daily basis. But what I'd love to know, Anne, you've touched on a few things. I know you've got a beautiful family and I know that you've got a beautiful home in Brisbane, but if I can ask you to reflect on your 40s, what are maybe some of the big financial decisions that you've had over the last few years, or maybe some of the things that have happened in your life that have had big financial consequences?
Look, I think the buying a home where you're taking on some real debt is ultimately the thing that caused me to make some bigger decisions. So when we bought our first home in our 30s, Josh, we went and got financial advice to make sure that we could, insurances were in place and all, and super funds were where they should be. But when you're taking on a bigger debt, we have 3 children that are now pretty well all teenagers, so we needed to have a bigger home. Looking at things like whether I should have whether I should have insurance inside of super, outside of super. What happens if either Frank or I fall off the perch, so to speak? And how do we fund that? Thinking about where is actually the best place to put Frank's and our superannuation, and is it with Sunsuper or not? And if not, why not? And can we afford to put more into super, or do we try and pay down our mortgage faster? And then there's this other thing called school fees, of which we have 3 of them. So that's just like a montage of all of the things that keep Frank and I in much discussion to the Fuchs family household in our 40s. What about you, Josh?
And Yeah, I find it amazing, Anne, that although I know we're two completely different people and live two completely different lives, the same issues have permeated through my life with Tash, my wife, over the last few years. Very early in my 40s, I was blessed with my son, and that was one of the most wonderful things that ever happened to us, but also probably one of the largest financial commitments we've ever had put on us. But I think also in that period, we've sold a home, we've sold an investment property, we've bought what hopefully will be our forever home. And even at the moment, we're going through major renovations that dare I say to you, things like the colour of the bricks has been keeping me awake at night thinking about.
Well, but you are an artist.
That's right. But I do think you've struck some of the key things that people do need to think about. That all of those decisions mean we've had to assess our insurance. All of those decisions have at different times meant we've had to assess what we're doing with our mortgage, how much we're deciding to pay down, especially in these times where there's really a lot of motivation to be trying to be putting more in our mortgage. But I also think in that period of my 40s, Tash, my wife, has gone through or is going through her 40s as well, and she's had a change in her career, and that's given us super opportunities as well. And I think about the co-contribution or me making spouse contributions or even doing spouse splitting, things that are small decisions now in our 40s, but I know are going to have a significant impact for us going into our 50s. And absolutely, even to what you said with yourself and Frank, that decisions we make today about our retirement are going to be absolutely huge when it comes to that point.
Regret isn't an emotion I particularly enjoy, and I do think in the past, as a consequence of my money can mean different things for different people. It can mean security, it can mean power, it can mean just enjoyment. It's probably a bit more enjoyment as far as I'm concerned. That there were some lost opportunities. What goes through my head was I've always been so militant about putting on sun cream from a very young age, so that when I'm 65, I've got, protected my skin. But then I wasn't thinking about that my bank balance at 65 or my superannuation balance, I was just thinking vanity really. So this is the 40s really are, and this sounds a bit dire, but our last shot to really change, shift the dial in terms of what we want to retire on. Because once you get to your 50s, it's really hard to change the narrative. It decreases the time you can take advantage of things like compounding interest, for example.
Oh, absolutely. And I completely agree. I think about all the stupid things I did in my 20s. I had fun at the time, but I certainly wasn't thinking more than probably a month ahead. In my 30s, we were just trying to set ourselves up. But I think in your 40s, there are some things that you can do that, as you said, take advantage of those last big opportunities. And I think it's really important to now start thinking about what you're doing this for. Retirement is maybe something that you're finally allowing yourself to have your first thoughts on, like serious thoughts. It's probably the time where you're thinking seriously about how much is in your super and what you want to do with it. And so I think there's decisions, and you've already mentioned you and Frank getting financial advice. And financial advice is something that Tash and I've been getting for well over 10 years now. But getting some financial advice in your 40s can really set you up on a completely different path. And you think about the decisions that can help you make around whether it's your insurance, whether it's your investments, whether it's looking at what you should be doing with your super, and how I mentioned that Tash had a change in her career, and that gave us opportunity to add more to Tash's super, while also balancing that with still paying off the mortgage, paying the school fees and everything else. It becomes I think too often people think they need to be doing one or the other, and I think the 40s is actually the time where you think about how you manage all of those.
You've got to walk and chew gum, and I think, look, I've always been the primary breadwinner in our house, and Frank stayed home and reared the 3 children, and is now back working again, which is great. But obviously his superannuation is now just starting to grow. So he's in the position that most women find themselves in, where they're retiring with a meagre balance compared to their male counterparts. And this is where, again, sitting down as a family unit and deciding what are the best decisions so that there is the family savings are being maximised, and is it deciding to pay down that mortgage faster. I know at Sunsuper we certainly do a projection on members' annual statements and say, look, and when you retire, you based on your current balance, you'll be retiring with $30,000. And I guess what, Josh, you and I would say to anyone is look at that, read that number and think, can we live on that number? Can we live on that when we retire? Do we like that number? And if we don't like that number, we've got to start doing something about it.
So to that point, Anne, can I, and maybe that's a bit leading for this question, but can I ask you, what is that something that people should be doing? We've talked a bit about what we've done, but if we think about you looking after our financial advice that we provide to our members, what are the discussions that people really should be having either within their family or the things that they should be reaching out and talking to one of our advisors or their own advisor?
Do you know what my honest reflection is around that? That most of our members, to be honest, wait a bit too late. So they get, they're probably, in 5 years out from retirement, and then they're going to get financial advice. And then there's some pretty hard conversations being had about, well, I know, Bill, you hate your job and your back hurts. So this is what it looks like. And if that number doesn't look good, we can take more risk. You can sacrifice more of your take-home income to put some money in, or you work longer. And so this is why I guess we're talking about this, because if none of those options are palatable in your 60s, then this is why in your 40s, answering those questions now about what you do with your savings and cash flow and where it goes really matters.
Yep. Well, can I also say that I think 40s is also when you need to make some decisions, as you even just alluded to. Those decisions maybe get harder the longer you leave them.
Yes.
And it's important to think about that. You've been in a super fund for decades. You've probably built up quite a substantial amount of super that you may not have even really looked at. And your 40s is your opportunity to actually look at your super funds and go, true. But the 40s is probably the chance for you to go, well, what's my super fund offer me? What investment choice do I have? Have I even thought about, do I have multiple super accounts that are sitting out there that now it's much simpler to clean up? I know when we're in our 30s, it was more difficult. But I think also looking at the member services, like at Sunsuper, we have a wonderful mobile app. We have financial advice our members can get access to that in regard to their Sunsuper account is at no additional cost. And we have wonderful investment performance, I know you talked to Brian about, which are all great benefits for super funds. But to be frank, they come to naught if you don't actually engage with it, if you're not making decisions or not choosing to use those member benefits. So I would encourage that in someone's 40s, it's really the best time to start holding your super fund to account, to start engaging with them, downloading the app and engaging with your balance, knowing what it is, to your point, but also starting to really look at what you're doing with your investments, with seeking out advice and guidance, and with actually seeking out further education.
And, just to call out to recognising that if people have if we're not, you might have another fund for a particular reason, and or you're thinking about insurance inside of super or outside of super. These are the things we're working with a financial advisor who is not associated with Sunsuper, who's independent of Sunsuper. But we at Sunsuper, again, as part of our member services, allow members to pay for that financial advice related to their retirement savings and that retirement savings plan out of their Sunsuper account to help affordability and accessibility of advice, because we know that those members that in their 40s, if they're having question, if they're thinking about where they consolidate into, where their SG goes, what voluntary contributions go in, whether they're taking advantage of any low-income contributions from the government. These are things that you can pay for with an external financial advisor, and Sunsuper can facilitate that, and that makes it really affordable, because I know, and Josh knows that, you know too, that in your 40s there's a lot of asks on the family budget. So to be able to fund financial advice associated with your retirement savings out of Sunsuper is, I think, a great member service as well.
And can I maybe I might finish on the point from my perspective, Anne, as to my own reflection on me seeking financial advice. And I think that there's a number of things that it does. Obviously, it sets me up for the future. It gives me a clear idea of where we're heading. But I think the other thing it's done, and I've become more aware of this in my 40s, as we've accrued debt with our home and other things, that I've become very aware that financial advice has meant that I know if something happens to me, or that if something had happened to me, say that Tash and Jonah, that my family is okay. I know that the financial advice we've sought has also set them up, and if something happens to me. And that is very, very important to me, that I sort of know the plans are set and we check in on those for the future occasionally. But I also know that it means it set us up very well for the present. Should something happen to Tash or myself, that we know that Jonah, that our family is looked after. And that for me is probably one of the strongest messages I could give on a 40s reflection.
No, and look, that's a very pertinent issue. Sadly, really good friend of mine passed away recently, 48, a heart attack, with 4 children, and this is why superannuation with insurance and is so very important in terms of providing cover for people. But I think too, it's a reflection generally about money, and that there is there's a point. There was some studies done, and there's a point where money no longer makes you happy anymore. But money, there is a point where money does make you happy, because that money gives you a sense of security, to your point earlier, and options and enjoyment. And so I think, again, why I think advice is really important is that there's no point saving it all. You can't take it take it with you to the cemetery, so to speak. And we all work really hard. So striking that balance between making some really good decisions for the now, for your family and for your future self in retirement is a balance, and it requires choices. And that's why I think getting advice and educating yourself is all part of that, what you need to do in your 40s. Well, can I make a confession? Sorry, can I make one confession? Can I make one confession? That we were going to go to Germany, but couldn't, to see Frank's parents. And so we decided we could have put the money into super, but we blew it on a pizza oven, and it brings our family much joy. So, it's all about choices. It was an informed, considered choice that we decided to build a pizza oven.
And I even think about the renovations at the moment. It's all this additional equity that we've got sitting on the home, but my wife realises the value in building me an art studio that she can kick me out into.
Yeah.
So yes, choices are important.
You only live once. Well, look, so what's your final message, I guess, to our members, who are in their 40s, or maybe other members who are listening to this today? What's your number one takeaway for them?
My number one takeaway would be to absolutely engage with your super. I think know what your balance is for a start, know where it's heading and what that's going to give you, and know how it's invested. I think, as I said earlier, superannuation funds now give you amazing tools to actually have tangibility of your super that we didn't have when we were in our 20s and 30s. So now is a really great opportunity. I would suggest that you engage with your super and know where it's heading and start to see whether there's those adjustments that you can make and do need to make that stop you having to make those hard decisions later in your 50s or into your 60s. That'd probably be my main take, Anne.
Yeah,
Yours?
that's very practical advice for those members who aren't getting advice and are starting from scratch. Downloading the app or logging into Member Online and actually just having a play I can guarantee you pique your curiosity and interest, and then that will just build and great things will come for your future self from that gesture. So, Josh, it's thank you for that little fireside chat about our families and money. It was fun.
And can I say, Anne, that for two people in our 40s, I think we're actually looking quite good for our young age.
We're fabulous. Just ask us all about it. We'll tell you everything. So, look, I think we're really privileged. We're, as you rightly point out, happiness is everything, and so we encourage all of our members to make the most of life, make the most of your super. Thank you so much for tuning in to the New School of Super. We hope this helps you engage with your superannuation with Sun Super. And as Josh said, call us on 13 11 84 if you ever want to have a chat about your retirement savings. Thanks for listening or watching.